Welcome to Grace and Truth with Gale and Johnny Rowlett.
We base this entire podcast on John 1:14, where it says Jesus was full of grace and truth. And those two words don't necessarily always go together, so we love that there's tension between those two words and that he was the perfection of both grace and truth. Join us today as we dive deep into his word and revelation and see how he unfolds both grace and truth.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Which is
4,000 generations. That's good.
Which is a powerful scripture.
Yeah.
That I was just going to say, all know that song very well.
It's called The Blessing. By whom?
Carrie Job.
I wanted to say grace and truth to you, but I wanted to take a second and just kind of welcome you to our podcast and thank you for following us and thank you for joining this journey with us. We hope that it's ministering to you the same that it's ministering to us. Our hope is to be authentic, transparent, and real, and help to walk this thing out together. I think too many people are, I told Gail, I want to be very careful that the podcast is not just teaching and training. There's a lot of those. I want it to be something that is shared, that you can see that we're walking through this. We've walked through some things and we're still walking through things. And that's why it's called a journey. And grace and truth really comes from John chapter 1, where he says that Jesus was full of grace and truth. And really those two words don't go together. Grace and love, grace and hope, grace and peace, grace and truth is an odd combination, and it's based off of the idea that he is both grace, but he also has truth, and yes, the two can work together. And especially when we start talking about root systems, we start really getting into all this kind of stuff. Is there's grace that needs to be given when you start realizing some of the root systems that have been planted there. I mean, so let's just be real about it. Some of those things you may have opened up the door to, but some of those things have been planted in you. And when you come to that understanding, you have to be able to forgive and give grace. But it doesn't take away from the truth of the situation. And that leads us really to our primary topic today. It's really a tough topic, in my opinion. It's a tough one to be exposed to, and that is sins of the father.
Or ancestry sins.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're going to start this in the positive note.
By
giving the scripture of Numbers 6:22. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name in the children of Israel, and I will bless them. So just starting in a positive note, that's the blessing of Moses.
Yeah, so Moses is the covenant that they, the Mosaic covenant that they were under. And what's interesting about blessings is that they're generational.
Right.
And that's the positive. But nobody ever stops to think as if there's generational blessings that can be presented. There's also curses.
Generational curses, right? Unfortunately.
To
the third and fourth generation
Yeah.
mentions that in Exodus.
Yeah.
And one of those, like you referenced, is sins of our ancestors or sins of our fathers, if you will.
Yeah.
And what doors did they open?
Yeah.
And that if it's not closed, or, you know, like we referenced in our previous podcast, is root systems. And this is another root system, is that if it's not pulled up by its roots, then it's going to bear fruit. Unfortunately, it's not going to be good.
And it's a tough one.
Right.
It's
So
a tough one
what
for me.
what does that look like? Okay,
yeah.
so Johnny referenced in a previous podcast talking about his father, and when his father was born, that his father's dad walked out when he was
Left
in
him abandoned.
utero, and then but it actually started even before that. So his grandma, which is his dad's mom, was adopted because her mom passed away. So the adoption opens the door.
Yep.
Death opens the door.
Oh, wow.
Then it goes on to his dad. So then later she gets married. She gets pregnant. Her husband leaves her.
Yep.
So there's all of those root issues that have started now. Now that seed form has started in multiple different levels. You can see, and it goes on and on, but unless you have the people standing here, it's kind of hard to follow if you don't know who it is.
Yeah.
So, but you can see the situation, you can see the systems. So now his dad is being raised not necessarily by his mom,
being raised by his grandfather.
His grandfather, and which is not his biological grandfather, it's his adopted grandfather.
Right.
So his mom is really kind of, doing her own thing and whatever, dealing with her own issues. And so then there's that abandonment issue. Then that goes on to, then it affects Johnny and his family, or in his life, abuse. And because sin is progressive, so sometimes it might start like this but looks like this in the end.
Say that again, because I don't think people are hearing you when you're saying that, because I thought that was a big revelation. Sin is progressive.
So what starts one thing, it might look like a different situation. So what might start as abandonment could turn into abuse, or could turn into anger, or could turn into, whatever the fruit is that this
fear,
root is
anxiety, stress,
revealing. Even in a sexual sin, if the door was opened, whether it's rape or molestation, whatever the door that is open to that, it progresses and looks differently.
And the world has a mentality of grabbing it by its throat, kind of, my dad did this to me, so by God, I'm not gonna do that, and although the heart is behind that and there's truth behind that, if you don't deal with it spiritually,
right,
all your grabbing it by the throat and ripping it, and manhandling it isn't going to work, and it'll just show up in other areas. I remember Gail and I went to go see a movie that ended up being supposedly a controversial movie, and some people that watch us may be offended by it, but we didn't know it was controversial. We just went out and watched a movie.
Well, and also a lot of people's lives have been changed from that movie. So it just depends on the perspective that you're watching it through.
We watched, it was called The Shack. And we had some friends in California, pastors, and they took us, hey, you want to go see this movie? Yeah, go see a movie. So we're within 5 minutes of that movie, and I'm sitting back, and I'm dropping down into my seat, and I reach over and I grab Gail, and I say, I can't watch this movie. I cannot. It was too close to home for me, and I was completely impacted, and just within 5 minutes of this movie going, I'm like, it's hitting things all over me, and I'm like, I can't watch it. Thankfully, Gail is full of grace and truth, so she leaned over and helped me through it. When I say thankfully is because what the movie did is it helped me to find the root issue, and then help me to love my father, love the and be able to understand where he came from, and where all of this happened was before him, and what he was dealing with. So what it helped me with was forgiveness and giving grace.
Right. And in that process also is when you're dealing with a root issue, that the blood is enough. Jesus dying on the cross is enough, but it doesn't come freely. It doesn't come automatic, I should
That's
say.
good.
It is free, but it doesn't come automatic. So in other words, you need to
That's good.
identify it, and then yes, cover it with the blood. Ask the Holy Spirit to reveal it. Disassociate with it. Cut it off at the root. What's the word you always say?
Be loose.
Denounce it.
Oh yeah,
Or
I lost it too. Yeah, to
whatever the word is that we use. We'll think
I like
of it.
denounce. That's a good one.
But
to break agreement.
yes, that's what it is.
To
So
break agreement.
break agreement with that.
Yeah.
So that by picture form, you're ripping it up by its root system and casting it out. So the future generations don't have to deal with that anymore.
Right.
And so, like I was talking about where I said sin is progressive, what starts off as this might end as this. So what might start off as, molestation might turn into illegitimacy.
Wow.
And so, it just might look a little different, but still from the same seed. So I think that's why we like to talk about these root systems.
Yeah.
And, try to help you understand really what a root system really looks like,
right,
and how to identify with it so that you can, cut ties with it.
Yeah. I actually am thinking of a certain person that has a circumstance, and it's not me. But this guy, he dealt with abuse from his father, and he's given me many, many examples, and some of them were horrific. But because he doesn't see the root of the issue, all he focuses on is the fruit of his life, not seeing how the two are connected. And what's interesting is we see the connection so clearly and have so much love and compassion and grace for him. But the truth is, you got to deal with this root.
Right.
And what it does is this root causes a fruit, and the fruit leads to shame. The fruit can be shame, but it leads to him, in this example I'm talking about, it leads him to such a level of shame that he can't even sometimes be out in public. Like when he goes into a restaurant or grocery stores or stuff like that, his hands go numb. He says his gums go numb, and he's so many times he felt like he was going to pass out. Well, is there something neurologically wrong with his body? Could be, probably not. What it really is that's the control shame issue, where he's trying to control the shame. So just back it down. So here's the fruit, and the action of the fruit is he's dealing with these horrific public. People are looking at me. People are seeing me, and all of a sudden now that shame, he's trying to control it and not be seen, and that's all from the root of being abused when he was a kid. So this is the problem, and so now what does he do? Go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. Every time I go to a grocery store, my hands go numb, and I feel like I'm going to pass out." And the doctor's going to go, "I don't know how to fix that." You know what I mean? I give you some medicine for your tingling of your hands. I don't even know. But that's what we do. We focus on the outward stuff.
Fix. We want a quick fix. We want a Band-Aid.
And there's something
digging deeper.
You got to go deeper, man. And it's the sad part for us is it's so obvious and so clear, and it's heartbreaking because we know that there's freedom.
You know, if you really look at the way the world is today with all of just the craziness
Yeah.
that goes on. And I don't even want to list them all because you know what they all are. You know, the just all the things and all the craziness that we are. If you look back and where it started, how many generations ago, what door was opened in these families' lives, and, you know, how are they dealt with it and whatever. Now, the fruit of all of that is here gleaming in all its pride.
Yeah.
You know, instead of no one ever dealing with the root issue,
Right.
this is where we are.
Or even knowing how.
Right.
Too.
Or,
That's
yeah.
another issue. I know another. Go ahead.
So many people just think that, you know, that it just happens and it's just like that's just the way it is, and, you know, whatever. But you have to realize that everything happens for a reason. There's a reason why that happened, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, whether the seed was planted, you know, because what you plant today, you're actually planting for your future. So that same thing that happened generations before you, that seed that was planted before you were even born, is now the fruit is showing in you today. And so be it good, bad, or anything in between. So you
That's
need to
good.
deal with the bad as well as dealing with the good.
That's good. This is a big one, what I'm about to talk about, because I think any of the men watching right now can, I would say that I think the statistics are that 70%, right around 70% of all men deal with some type of pornography, sexual, uh, impurity, just all the different, and a lot of that, if you just, if you track that back down, there's a generational curse there.
Mm-hmm.
I know for my sake, I know that I was 8 years old, 8 years old, and I found a little porno mag. It was, I don't know, porno, is that, I don't know what an 8-year-old would have found it. Yeah.
I think
An
Run
8-year-old would
DMC
have,
wrote
yeah.
a song about that.
What I don't know what they would have called it, but I found a little thing. And I actually took it to school, and I was like,
But if you think about it, really, and you may never know, but I don't think that was the seed that was planted at that time. I'm sure
huh.
that generations before that, there was
Oh,
probably
no.
a
Yeah.
door that was opened
Yeah,
to
exactly.
whether it was your grandparents, you know, you
Yes.
didn't know your great grandparents,
Right.
or biological great
Right.
grandparents. So, or at least on your dad's, I don't know about.
But that's my
them on your
point, is
mom's side.
that generational curse was even, attacking, trying to did plant itself at even 8 years old.
Right.
8 years old. And then that thing came, and produced fruit even in my high school years, I to the point that it became a full-blown addiction. It's so easy now to look back over my shoulder, and see where that came from. And here's the thing, the tendency, and I'm speaking to the men, and there's some women that struggle with it too, but the tendency is, I gotta stop.
I mean, that's any addiction.
Yeah,
Really.
I gotta stop this. I gotta stop, and we do. Okay, that's truth. But you can manhandle this thing, and I don't know how many years and years and years and years that I just kept saying, I can stop this, I can fix this, I can. And it only to keep rearing, coming back. It's cyclical. It just keep coming back around and showing its head. And it seemed like to me it got worse and worse and worse and worse, until finally what happened is I was able to discover the root of it. There's a lot of tools that we've discussed in the past or our podcast that I was able to walk through. But the biggest thing is we stopped looking at the fruit, and we got down to the root. And when you start getting down to the root of it, then you can start pulling that thing out. And then Jesus became my focus, right? Not the root. And then when Jesus became my focus, he produced fruit in me. And the next thing I know, the fruit that was the pornography was cut out and pruned,
dried up. Yep. And
because
now
that root was the root healed the fruit.
Right. And then you're going back and planting
Good
with that left.
Good seed.
Right.
That's good. Yeah, I just think that this is a big one.
Yes.
You know, because a lot
it
of
goes deep.
It does.
But I think the majority of why we are talking about all these different roots is just to kind of shine a light on what we believe runs so rampant in people's lives.
Wow.
And they don't know why. They don't know where this is coming from. They don't know why they're dealing with this, you know, such as
focused on the fruit,
you know, him dealing with this pornography. Okay, where did this come from? Well, you don't know what doors were opened, you know, a few generations ago.
Yeah.
Because it says that it'll go to the third and fourth generation. So you don't know what door was opened before, and that now all of a sudden you're dealing with it. Your parents might not have dealt with it,
yeah,
but now you're dealing with it.
Yeah.
And so when you can identify with that, and even if you don't know where it came from,
wow,
you know it's there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, let's break agreement with it and cover
agreement.
it by the blood and be able to heal from it and then move past it and be able to turn around and help your brother.
That's so good. That's Luke 11, I think, or Luke 15. But I think about something you said years ago, a couple years ago. You had a real heavy burden for the next generation. And I've seen you get emotional just a few times, and this was one of them. And you proclaimed that you believed that the enemy was trying to, and I'm using your words, assassinate the next generation. And that has been the enemy's plan from the get-go. But it seems to be ramping up. And I think some reason it might be ramping up is he's calling all things to the front. And so all of these seeds that he's been planting and that forefathers have been and ancestors have been planting, we're getting closer to some kind of end here. And so all of a sudden the enemy is calling all those cards up. And there we have to remember there's a root, but there's also an enemy. The enemy that desires to steal, kill, and destroy. And the problem is not the fault finding of your ancestors and your fathers and your mothers.
Right, exactly. But it's dealing with the issue so we no longer have to deal with it. I think that's our biggest thing is that so we can close the door on that so the next generation doesn't have to deal with that.
That's good.
You know, I don't want my grandchildren to have to deal with any of the issues that I've dealt with.
Wow.
So I want to be able to go look behind it, rip up that root and close that door so that they no longer have to deal with any of the sins of my ancestors, that I put a demarcation in the ground saying this far and no further. Enemy, you have no authority. I have all dominion over this situation, and it's going no further than here.
That's good.
So that when I look at Michaela and when I look at Roman and whoever's coming next, I can say, yeah, it's this far, no further. You'll never have to deal with this from here on out because the blood is enough. And because I have called it out and because I have broke agreement with it, that it's covered. We're moving past it and we're carrying on.